Together we run an ecological building company called Cob and Cornwall, which focuses on cob essentially. That's our main sort of building material. So we're obviously here in the UK in Cornwall, which is on the far west coast of England, southwest coast, and we focus on the sensitive restoration of old ancient cob buildings. But we also do new build cob, so that's our repertoire. Okay. And a sort of applicable finishes, so lime finishes, earthen plasters, etc.
Well, I started building at quite a young age. At about age 8, I started building forts in my backyard, little tunnel underground forts. Absolutely loved working with my hands, being outside, getting dirty, eating mud, all the rest of it. And from there I started building skateboard ramps, and so I started doing a little bit of woodworking, construction work and things like that. And then started building ponds and getting into stones and just stacking stones and kind of creating mosaics with stones and creating walls with stones. And really it wasn't until we were introduced to the Cob Cottage Company where we actually started building with earth and building cob walls and applicable finishes and whatnot.
I think really we both enjoyed working outside, but we first came to Cob Cottage Company with the view to wanting to build our own home. I mean, I think that's why we both went and did the apprenticeship course, was because we really wanted to sort of take it into our own hands, to buy some land and build ourselves, be empowered to build ourselves a house. And we did the course, and we were just completely taken with it. It was just fun, like it changes everyone's lives really to do that course. And I think from there, it just sort of, I don't think we ever made any conscious decisions that we were going to make it part of our life. It was just a sort of momentum snowball effect.
Absolutely.
We came back and did some work with a guy in England, in Cornwall, and just sort of, there was no question that it was going to be the main focus of our lives and our occupation, and that's how it happened. There were no conscious decisions. It just sort of had gathered its own momentum really, and this is where it sort of brought us to. Haven't had time to build our own house yet, but
we're still looking for that. Yeah,
we're still making the mistakes on other people so that we can get ours perfect.
Exactly.
It was a very serendipitous,
very random
event. Yeah. We were on a trip the West Coast to sort of like find the perfect place to settle down and build a house, and we didn't know about cob at that point.
And we both thought we wanted to do master's programs, kind of continue our education.
But we were in Powell's bookstore in Portland, in Oregon, and we've been in there for about 4 hours, as you do. We're at the last place, we're about to leave, and we're on the bottom floor where they had all the second-hand books. And I came across this sort of cart that had all these books that people obviously been pilfering through, and they're ready to go back on the shelves. And I was attracted towards this sort of rather crumpled looking brown sort of thin booklet, and I picked it out, and it looked like it was from the 70s or something. And it was the Cob Cottage Company. It was their first publication they ever did. It was a reader, and it was lots of collections of articles about cob in Britain, Adobe, and just sort of bringing earth building together. And we both looked at it and we were like, wow, this looks pretty interesting.
We were just fascinated by it. It just looked so interesting.
And
we wanted to find out more.
But we were kind of like, shame it was from the 70s. And then we looked and we realised that it wasn't. It was sort of like in the last 5 years. And we realised that we were about 30 miles from where they were based. And so we gave them a ring.
Next day. Went there?
Yeah, and went along and met Susan. Susan.
Sat on a rocket stove bench and looked at
saw
some of
all
the
the
walls
buildings, and we were just
touched them and realized that was definitely something that we wanted to dedicate our time to. We had no clue that we wanted to dedicate our lives to it, but just we knew that we wanted to learn more about it and take courses, do whatever we had to do. But to learn
I guess
more,
from that moment on we decided, from the moment we got there and saw it, that was the moment we decided we wanted to do the apprenticeship.
At the time, you hadn't heard of cob building in England. You grew up in England.
Yeah, not really. I mean, everyone knows the archetypal sort of picturesque chocolate box thatched cottage, and generally that kind of building is made out of cob. But to be honest, I mean, it's hard now even to think back and to think if I did know about it, but I don't think I really did know anything about cob in Britain. And I'm sure you certainly
I certainly didn't. I had no clue. No.
Yeah.
I knew about adobe in the States, but certainly not about cob in England. Yeah.
But it certainly helped when we were trying to convince the parents. It was my mum was like, "Oh yeah, I know this." It was a very different and quite a sobering experience coming back here and working on that project, because it's very different. For a start, the method is different. You use a pitchfork. So you really don't get your hands in it, and it's a very different kind of. I would say in the States, it's in the way that we were taught. It's that very sort of tactile, touchy-feely. You put all your heart and your soul into it. Whereas we came here and it was just very much. It felt like we were on a bit of a conventional building site really, but just the material was different. So the approach was still quite conventional and conservative. It was just a different material that had come from this history of tradition instead of from a new wave of a new movement. Let's use this as an eco-material. It's more, let's use this because it's interesting and important. If you can understand what I mean.
So the attitude was different as well. So the attitude towards the material for the people who are actually using the material here in the UK is quite different from the people who are using the material in America.
So it was quite a sobering experience, and it was quite a harsh experience because we kind of come from the woods.
At first it was.
Where we were living in the woods, and it was all it was just wonderful, and then...
It's quite community oriented.
Yeah. And then suddenly we were on a work site, 9 to 5, being paid for it. It was a very different experience, but no less valuable,
Absolutely. So we learned our core skills there as well in a different way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly, completely opposite end of the spectrum. And we were somewhere in the middle, and we were okay, which way do we go? And really, hopefully, we've tried to bring them both together, and ultimately it is all the same anyway. So, We actually